Hello everyone. It's a pleasure to join you at the AI Festival. My name is Matt Forshaw and today I'll be speaking to you about the future of AI skills. This talk will draw on my experience working as Programme Director of Data Science and AI Programmes at Newcastle University and in my role as National Skills Lead at the Turing Institute, which is the UK's National Institute for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. My contact details are available on this slide and I'll be very happy to discuss these topics further if you're interested. I've also made available a copy of my slides as well as an accessible transcript and additional resources at the GitHub link shown on the slide. To set the scene today, I'd like to speak about 4 key challenges in the data skills space at present. In particular, I'll focus on those which represent the most significant barriers to progress and those which represent the greatest threat to the UK's competitiveness. The first issue concerns terminology and nomenclature. There are genuine disagreements around what constitutes data science and AI, and these have not been resolved satisfactorily by prior efforts at standardisation. We observe a significant increase in the number of university programmes in data science and AI, but with their emphasis differing, their contributions to skills need is difficult to assess at a glance. These challenges around terminology perpetuate through the labour market, leading to the inconsistent use of role descriptors which complicate skills assessment and hiring practices. Secondly, the data skills landscape in the UK suffers from an acute data deficit, which restricts both strategic planning and decision making. Key bodies remain unconvinced of the nature and scale of the data skills gap, with particular challenges in assessing regional and sectoral disparities in training provision, as well as assessing restrictions on historically underrepresented groups. There's a pressing need to support the collection and analysis of high-quality data to help policymakers and providers identify gaps and opportunities in skills training. The third challenge is around lack of alignment between training offerings and the needs of the workforce. It's particularly encouraging to see the revitalised discussions around professionalisation of the data science occupation, and this includes many professional bodies in this space, including BCS, the Royal Statistical Society, the OR Society and the Royal Academy of Engineering. This will explore the role of accreditation to ensure educational programmes deliver the right skills and knowledge for those looking to enter the profession. Finally, we must move to focus on raising awareness and widening access to the variety of routes to academic and vocational training, with a particular emphasis on attracting historically underrepresented groups to the field. When I talk about skills in data science and AI, I love to start with this diagram. This speaks to the interdisciplinary nature of the field, bringing together skills from computing and maths and statistics, as well as subject matter expertise. The centre section here is referred to as unicorn, based on this rare, almost mythical blend of skills that one individual is sometimes expected to possess. Each year when I welcome students to my data science and AI programmes at Newcastle University, we run a short exercise where I encourage everyone to position themselves within this diagram based on their previous experience and their confidence levels. What this invariably shows is the diverse background of our students, which is always really exciting, but also the tendency towards imposter syndrome in the field. We have students from computing backgrounds whose last memory of maths and stats was large class sizes back in school. We have students from maths and stats backgrounds who feel slightly daunted by some of the contemporary tooling and software engineering best practice in relation to data science and AI. We also have individuals returning to study with us from careers in industry who are intimidated by the higher education setting, and new graduates equally intimidated by their commercial experience. Meanwhile, I'm somewhere in the middle feeling a healthy dose of imposter syndrome in every direction. I've since come to see this diagram as a fantastic way to position training offerings in data science and AI. The ideal is always to have equal representation across the CS and maths and stats groups in the delivery of training. The reason for this isn't that statistics training cannot be taught adequately by those from other fields, rather that we'd like to highlight to students the research advances which will impact their professional practice within 5 to 10 years. You could just about convince me to teach an introductory statistics course, but I wouldn't be qualified to speak to the research advances in as compelling a way as someone who's at the frontier of that field. Where I'd like to focus is these areas outside of the core, computing and statistics. It's shown here as subject matter expertise, but other versions of this diagram refer to it as commercial acumen. Looking at these other areas is particularly important when we consider findings such as Gartner's, showing that 85% of big data and data science projects fail to move from proof of concept to production. This is shown to primarily be for organisational reasons rather than technical ones. These are factors which inhibit the translation of data science and AI developments into practice. At Newcastle University, we look to deliver these challenges through training on data-driven innovation training. At Newcastle University, we look to address these challenges through training on data-driven innovation. We deliver this as a 10-day incubator program in collaboration with the National Innovation Centre for Data. We equip students with commercial awareness around the use of data and AI, where students are immersed in an industry setting, working with stakeholders on real problems. In this course, we introduce customer journey development, the business model canvas, and value proposition mapping approaches. The aim here is to support students to be able to reason over the value of data-driven innovation and to be able to articulate its potential value as well as potential risks to key stakeholders in a way that achieves buy-in. While many of these tools that we teach originated from the lean startup movement, we see them being equally applicable for reasoning over internal-facing data products. And we often hear from our graduates that this experience is particularly instrumental in their transition into graduate roles once they've left us. Collaborative curriculum co-development with partners naturally requires significant resource and expertise. And at Newcastle, we're fully committed to ensuring that our training reaches the greatest number of learners possible. To this end, all of our curriculum materials are available open source under a Creative Commons license. And what this means is they're available for adoption with your own learner groups and in your own courses. So please feel very free to get in touch if you're interested in finding out more. Anaconda, in their The State of Data Science 2020 report, surveyed over 2,000 people between February and April 2020. They found that only 15% of university graduates in data science believed they'd received adequate training on ethics. It's clear that we must embed ethics throughout the taught curriculum rather than just in elective modules. And a question I would like for us to think about collectively is this: how might we support our learners in their professional practice upon graduation? We can certainly impart values and ways of thinking to our learners, but how do we equip them to uphold these values in a professional setting where colleagues or maybe their organisation don't share these values? It's critical that we consider these cultural issues as a cross-cutting concern in our data science curricula. In particular, we need to develop strong awareness of algorithmic bias and fairness, which risks creating exclusionary experiences and discriminatory practices. These biases may arise, for example, from a lack of diversity in training sets for machine learning models. Open source libraries and pre-trained models then perpetuate these biases, often with a very low friction for them being incorporated into projects which have a very real impact on society. We need to explicitly check the impact of bias during development and testing, and advocate strongly for diverse teams with different life experiences governing the development and use of these technologies. This diversity is essential to the development of a robust data science skills base. Therefore, we need to draw on the country's entire intellectual capital to do so. Progression into postgraduate training in data science is as low as 11% for Black and 8.4% for disabled students. The inequitable impact of COVID-19 on women and BAME communities is likely to have slowed progress on diversity and inclusion in all sectors. When we consider the ONS's estimate that over 70% of the 1.5 million roles at risk of automation are held by women, it's clear that urgent intervention is required. For those interested in this topic, I strongly recommend BCS's report, Scaling Up the Ethical AI MSc Pipeline. One of the most promising steps in widening participation was that in June 2020, the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport and the Office for AI announced £13 million to support degree conversion courses in data science and AI. This included £10 million for up to 1,000 scholarships for people from diverse backgrounds, and this was matched by an additional £11 million from universities and industry partners. At Newcastle University, we were one of 13 universities to receive this funding. We recognise the significant contribution that the £10,000 scholarships makes to our learners, and we look to support them further through some additional mechanisms. We offer pre-sessional training to help applicants develop confidence in the HE setting, to identify themselves as beneficiaries of these courses, and also to attract applicants from outside of STEM disciplines. We allocate industry mentors who hold leadership roles in data science, many of whom themselves are from historically underrepresented groups, and we also guarantee industry internships at the point of entry for scholarship holders. Through this national scheme, we'll see a total of 2,500 learners equipped with data science and AI technical skills, as well as the contextual knowledge and experience to apply these to real-world problems. Lack of alignment between academic and industry needs and skills offerings is a key inhibiting factor in both education and industry. A McKinsey survey of chief data officers found that 26% of CDOs and 40% of sophisticated users of AI reported translation of academic innovation into industry as a key barrier to AI adoption. Meanwhile, taught programs rarely expose learners to the scale of problems faced by industry, nor provide the opportunity to develop business and sector awareness. This leads to challenges not only in supporting the translation of AI into practice, but the translation of leading industry practice back into the national training curriculum. A breadth of organisations spanning academic, industry, learned societies and professional bodies all contribute to addressing the skills challenges in the data science and AI space, and to identify good practice for education and skills provision. These challenges are unlikely to be resolved by industry or academia alone, motivating the need for interventions that stimulate deep and meaningful collaboration and knowledge sharing among these groups. For example, the Turing Institute's convening of the Data Skills Task Force represents a distinct forum bringing together a breadth of groups, including public and private sector, learned societies and professional bodies, with an increasing track record of bringing strategic alignment around the data skills gap. The Turing, through its role co-chairing the Data Skills Task Force, has supported the development of an online skills portal to help organisations, particularly SMEs, to identify their organisational and technical readiness with respect to data, and signpost them to training to develop their data capabilities further. The portal has seen around 24,000 users to date and is available at dataskillstaskforce.com. This project was funded by DCMS, the Alan Turing Institute, Nationwide Building Society, with strong support from other Data Skills Task Force members. This proof of concept has been identified as an area of importance as part of a forthcoming commitment of the government's Digital Strategy and National Skills Fund. One area I've been particularly involved in over the last 2 years has been in establishing the Artificial Intelligence Data Specialist Apprenticeship at master's level. The standard was developed by a trailblazer group led by the BBC and includes many of the organisations and universities shown in the top right of this slide, including BT. This apprenticeship started delivery in October, with a further round of delivery in January 2021. For those interested in the fantastic opportunities offered by apprenticeship training, strongly encourage people to reach out and get in touch. We must continue to work to meet the needs of industry and skills offerings. There are now calls for further discipline-specific flavours of apprenticeship standards. For example, Science Industry Partnerships Skills of 2030 report advocates very strongly for apprenticeship standards targeting the life sciences. But we need to work to ensure there's consistency across each of these standards, that they continue to provide valuable routes to upskilling in areas of critical importance, with funding routes available to SMEs. To close my session, I wanted to return to the discussion around equality and diversity, and to present you a performance by Joe Blomwini of MIT and founder of the Algorithmic Justice League. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to taking any questions you might have. In light of your comments in the Q&A, I'll continue to contribute resources at the GitHub link shown below. Thank you very much, and I do hope you enjoy the rest of the festival.
My heart smiles as I bask in their legacies, knowing their lives have altered many destinies. In her eyes, I see my mother's poise. In her face, I glimpse my auntie's grace. In this case of deja vu, a 19th century question comes into view. In a time when Sojourner Truth asked, "Ain't I a woman?" Today we pose this question to new powers, making bets on artificial intelligence, hope towers. The Amazonians peek through windows blocking deep blues as faces increment scars. Old burns, new urns, collecting data chronicling our past, often forgetting to deal with gender, race, and class. Again I ask, ain't I a woman? Face by face, the answers seem uncertain. Young and old, proud icons are dismissed. Can machines ever see my queens as I view them? Can machines ever see our grandmothers as we knew them? Ida B. Wells, data science pioneer, hanging facts, stacking stats on the lynching of humanity, teaching truths hidden in data, each entry and omission, a person worthy of respect. Shirley Chisholm, unbought and unbossed, the first Black Congresswoman, but not the first to be misunderstood by machines well-versed in data-driven mistakes. Michelle Obama, unabashed and unafraid to wear her crown of history, yet her crown seems a mystery to systems unsure of her hair. A wig, a bouffant, a toupee, maybe not. Are there no words for our braids and our locks? Does relaxed hair and sunny skin make Oprah the first lady? Even for her face well known, some algorithms fault her, echoing sentiments that strong women are men. We laugh, celebrating the successes of our sisters with serena smiles. No label is worthy of our beauty.
Hi there, Matthew. Thank you very much for that keynote, and welcome to the festival. Matthew, I mean, what a powerful video that you just played out at the end of your keynote there. First question: what do you see as the main barriers to bringing AI and data science to new disciplines like humanities?
That's a really interesting question, and from my experience working in the university sector for probably the last decade, what I tend to see in disciplines like the humanities and many others is there are fantastic, really proactive individuals who have started to bring data science and AI into their own research practice, but there have been challenges around bringing that to their learners. So something we're beginning to pilot at the Turing Institute to try and resolve this is around instructor training for people wanting to bring data science to new disciplines. So this will include pedagogic training in delivery of data science and AI in things like computer lab settings, which might be unfamiliar to people from other disciplines, but also will incorporate quite a strong mentoring route to support people to uptake these new practices in their tuition. So this is part of a broader group that will bring together groups from different disciplines as well as industry to try and share best practice in that sort of space. It's a very good question.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Thanks, Matthew. So we at Adastral are very proud of our Tommy Flowers network, and this is a kind of an organisation that brings together academic students, graduates, postgrads, brings together industry with that academia and looks at industry challenges, business challenges, and the idea is to kind of collaborate across those and understand what the art of the possible might be. And I know that the Alan Turing Institute has often been part of those conversations. You mentioned in your talk actually the gap between academic learning and then the real world application of data science. What do you think the best way of addressing that gap is? And, for example, how could we enhance what we do with that Tommy Flowers network almost to kind of help address that gap?
Absolutely, and I think that network's a fantastic example of good practice in this space. And it's around supporting, bringing together those two distinct communities. I noticed in the chat box that Henrik was asking a question around data engineering and why that was particularly absent in terms of university provision. And I think that's a fantastic example, a subfield of data science and AI, where industry practice and tooling is moving particularly rapidly. And because of that lack of communication between university partners, between industry practitioners, there's just that real struggle of bringing that practice back into the taught curriculum. And I think the impact of this is always going to be particularly pronounced in perhaps regions where these organizations aren't present. When we look at the sorts of academic industry collaboration that goes on right now, it's heavily driven by relationships where someone senior in the organization is an alumni of that department, or there's always a physical proximity effect there. So I think what's really important in thinking about this is making sure that we can cut across some of these sector and regional barriers to make sure that everyone can learn and benefit from this best practice.
I'm actually so pleased to hear you say that, because one of the initiatives that we are building right now here at Industrial Park is our Digitech Centre. So this is something that's been spearheaded by University of Suffolk in collaboration with BT to put on site an Institute of Learning. And the very premise of that is that the close proximity to our 150 plus cluster and the businesses involved means that we should be able to start to chip away at that gap. So I'm really delighted to hear you say that.
Absolutely. And actually, talking of those 150 companies, but also we'll have nationally many sort of small, medium companies, Matthew, listening in today, wondering, how do I approach upskilling in data and AI? What's my next step?
Absolutely. So this is something that, as the Turing Institute, we've seen really acutely, this impact of SMEs in terms of the need for signposting and identifying next steps, whether that's in decisions around recruitment, decisions around supporting internal staff to upskill. So the Turing plays a role co-convening Data Skills Task Force, which brings together public and private sector organizations around data skills gap. And at dataskillstaskforce.com, we've launched a portal targeting particularly SMEs as an audience. So this includes a self-assessment process, which people can step through in probably 5 or 10 minutes, covering various areas of data readiness and capability building. And from there, we signpost off to training we think will be most beneficial in that sort of space. So that's freely available and accessible now. And in the link that I popped in my slides, and I'll drop into the chat as soon as I've finished, you'll be able to access that there.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Are there, in that gap, are there particular areas that you observe, more than others in terms of the skills training approach?
That's very interesting. I think what I've seen is, in terms of technical training, there's a great wealth of material there, and there is obviously a signposting challenge to being able to identify the most appropriate resources for particular audiences. Something that I think is lacking at the moment is around the commercial awareness piece we're doing some work at the Turing and through the Data Skills Task Force to try and progress work in this area. But it's around helping individuals, whether they're in deep technical roles or whether they're in data adjacent roles, to identify the commercial opportunities as well as the opportunities and the risks, and to put forward principled frameworks to help people explore that, and to take to take these ideas forward in a way that will reach acceptance in the organization. So I think we're pretty well served at the moment in terms of the technical side, but it's in terms of the commercial application piece, that's where training is sort of particularly missing at the moment.
Okay. Oh, that's
and Matthew, is that where you see it sort of training evolve in this space over the next 5 years, or do you see other elements playing into effect?
So I think there will always be the need for developing this deep technical expertise, but with that will be this absolutely ballooning need for supporting people into data adjacent roles, to support people being able to be confident in having these discussions across technical and business audiences. So I think we lead with one, but we need to be aware that there are going to be a breadth of roles around the data and the AI ecosystem, and we need to be able to support those equally.
Perfect. Well, Matthew, thank you ever so much for your time. Thank you for being part of the AI Festival. I know you're going to put those links into the chat for everybody to access as well, and hopefully they'll utilise those and get in contact with you. But again, thank you ever so much for being part of the festival.
Yes, superb. Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks, Matthew.
That's great. Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Lisa.